A brown bear is standing over a fresh carcass in the snow. 400 kilograms of muscle, claws as long as your fingers. An animal with no natural predator anywhere in its range. On a kill, it has every reason to defend. And it is backing away. The animal walking towards it weighs 15 kilograms. It is shorter than the bear's foreleg. It has no pack behind it, no size advantage, no weapon the bear does not already have in a larger version. It walks straight at 400 kilograms of predator, and the predator gives up the meal. This happens. It has been filmed. It has been recorded by biologists who did not believe it until they watched it twice. And it happens because of one advantage this animal has. It is not strength. It is not teeth. It is not venom or speed or numbers. It is something so unglamorous that most people who tell this story leave it out entirely because it does not sound like a superpower. I will tell you exactly what it is at the end of this video. Keep it in mind because everything else you're about to see is built on top of it. This is the wolverine. First, let us kill a misunderstanding, because almost everyone has the wrong picture in their head. A wolverine is not a small bear. It is not a badger, although it looks like one that has been left in the mountains too long. It is not related to wolves at all, despite the name, which is a translation error that has followed this animal across 3 languages and never been corrected. It is a mustelid. That is the family that contains weasels, stoats, otters, martens, and badgers. The wolverine is the largest terrestrial member of that family, and understanding that single fact reframes everything else, because mustelids share a temperament. They are, pound for pound, among the most aggressive mammals on Earth. A stoat weighing 200 grams will attack a rabbit 5 times its mass. A least weasel will take on animals that could kill it by accident. Now take that temperament and scale it up to the size of a medium dog. The scientific name is Gulo. It means glutton twice. Whoever named it was not trying to be subtle. A large male weighs between 12 and 18 kilograms. The record specimens push past 20. Body length is roughly 70 to 100 centimeters, with a bushy tail adding another 20. Shoulder height is around 45 centimeters, which means that if one walked past you in the snow, it would not reach your knee. That is the entire animal, 15 kilograms of it on average. Remember that number, because in a moment we're going to compare it to what that 15 kilograms is capable of eating through. The fur is the first thing that gives it away as an Arctic specialist. It is thick, dark brown, with a pale band running along each flank and meeting across the rump. But the important detail is not the color, it is the structure. Wolverine fur is hydrophobic. Water does not soak into it, and critically, frost does not bind to it. Breath condenses on ordinary fur and freezes into a crust of ice around the face, which is why most Arctic mammals end a winter night with a white mask. Wolverine guard hairs shed that ice. The animal can sleep in the open at -40 and wake up without a frozen muzzle. This is why indigenous peoples across the Arctic, from Alaska through northern Canada to Siberia, have used wolverine fur specifically for the hood trim on winter parkas. Not for warmth, not for status, for the single functional property that it does not ice up against the skin of your face when you breathe. That is a small detail, but hold on to it. It tells you what this animal was built for, and the answer is not fighting. It is enduring. Now the jaws. The wolverine's skull is heavy, broad, and reinforced with a pronounced sagittal crest running along the top. That crest is an anchor point for the temporalis muscle, which is the muscle that closes the jaw. A large crest means a large muscle. A large muscle means bite force out of all proportion to body size. But the crushing power is not the interesting part. Plenty of animals bite hard. The interesting part is a single tooth. In the upper jaw, the last molar is rotated, not worn at an angle, not damaged. Rotated 90 degrees in the socket, turned sideways relative to the tooth row as standard anatomy in every healthy wolverine. That rotation turns the tooth into a dedicated tool. It presents a hard, flat, crushing surface inward towards the center of the mouth, where a normal molar would present a chewing surface downward. The wolverine can therefore take a bone into the side of its mouth and apply the full force of that reinforced skull to a single point, in a direction other carnivores simply cannot generate. And what it uses this for is the thing that separates it from every other predator in its range. It eats frozen bone. Not fresh bone, frozen bone. A carcass that has been lying at -30 for 2 weeks is, for most animals, a solid object. A wolf cannot open it. A fox cannot open it. A lynx will not attempt it. The meat is locked inside a shell of ice and frozen tissue that has the mechanical properties of hardwood. The wolverine chews through it. Bone, hide, tendon, hoof, frozen marrow. It processes parts of a carcass that no other scavenger in the ecosystem can access, which means it is not competing for the same resource as everything else. It is eating the leftovers of the leftovers. And that is the first piece of the answer to the bear question, although it is not the answer itself. Keep waiting. Now the feet, because this is where the animal becomes genuinely strange. Wolverine paws are enormous, disproportionate. A 15-kilogram animal walks on feet that would look correct on something 3 times heavier. The toes spread wide when weight comes onto them, and there is thick fur between and around the pads. The effect is a snowshoe. What matters here is a measurement called foot loading, which is body weight divided by the surface area of the feet. It tells you how far an animal sinks into soft snow. A wolf has high foot loading and breaks through a crust that a wolverine walks across. A reindeer, at well over 100 kilograms, punches straight down to the ground with every step. The wolverine has some of the lowest foot loading of any carnivore in the northern hemisphere. Read that again, because it does not sound like much, and it changes everything. In deep, soft, late winter snow, the wolverine is faster than the animals that would normally outrun it, and faster than the animals that would normally kill it. Not because it is quick, because it is on the surface and they are not. Every large predator in the Arctic loses mobility in deep snow. The wolverine keeps it. That is not a fighting advantage, it is a positional one. And in a landscape this size, position is worth more than muscle. Speaking of size, let us talk about the territory, because the numbers here are not believable the first time you hear them. A female wolverine holds a home range of roughly 100 to 500 square kilometers. A male holds anywhere from 500 to 1,500, and in the emptiest parts of the range, larger still. 1,500 square kilometers for one animal. That is an area larger than many capital cities, patrolled by a single carnivore that weighs less than a Labrador. And it does patrol it. This is not a territory it sits in the middle of. The wolverine moves constantly, in long looping circuits, checking the entire range for anything edible. Individuals have been tracked covering 30 to 40 kilometers in 24 hours through mountainous terrain, in winter, without a road, a trail, or a flat surface anywhere in the route. One radio-collared male in Alaska crossed a mountain range in a straight line, over a pass, through snow, in conditions that would kill an unequipped human in hours. It did not detour. It went over. That behavior has a name in the literature. Researchers call it, informally, going straight through. Wolverines are notorious among biologists for refusing to root around obstacles. A ridge, a glacier, a frozen river, a mountain face. The animal takes the direct line. Hold that thought too. It is going to matter at the end. Now we come to the part everyone wants, and I'm going to be honest with you about it because the internet is not. The robbery. The wolverine is a kleptoparasite. That is the technical term for an animal that makes a living by taking food other animals have already killed. It is a real and central part of the wolverine's ecology, and it is very well documented. But the version you have heard is exaggerated, and I'm not going to sell it to you. Here is what the evidence actually supports. Wolverines regularly displace wolves from kills, usually single wolves or pairs rather than a full pack. They displace lynx routinely. They displace coyotes and foxes without difficulty. They have been recorded taking carcasses from cougars, and in the case of cougars, this is common enough that some researchers consider wolverines a meaningful pressure on cougar feeding success in certain valleys. Theirs are a different question. Encounters between wolverines and bears are documented, and there are credible accounts and footage of a wolverine holding a carcass against a bear, or a bear withdrawing rather than pressing a confrontation. What is not true is that this is routine, or that the wolverine wins by force, or that bears are afraid of wolverines in any general sense. A determined bear kills a wolverine. That is simply the physics of the situation. So why does it ever work at all? Because the two animals are not playing the same game. For a bear standing on a carcass in autumn, that meal is one of many. It has fat reserves. It has a home range full of berries, fish, roots, and other carcasses. It is weeks away from a den where it will sleep through the worst of the year. The meal is worth something, but it is not worth an injury, because an injured bear going into winter is a dead bear in spring. For the wolverine, the calculation is completely different. It does not hibernate. It has no fat reserve worth the name. It is going to be awake, outdoors, and burning calories every single day of a winter that lasts 7 months. That carcass is not a meal. It is infrastructure. So one animal is defending a snack, and the other is defending its survival through to April. And the one defending its survival does not stop, does not posture, does not back off when it is bitten, and does not display any of the normal de-escalation signals that mammals use to end a fight before it becomes serious. The bear reads that, not consciously, but it reads it. It is looking at an animal that will not disengage, and it is doing the arithmetic on a fight it cannot profit from. That is the mechanism. Not strength, asymmetry of stakes. And now you can see why the wolverine is built the way it is. Every piece of that anatomy serves the same function. The fur that does not ice, the feet that do not sink, the jaw that opens frozen bone. None of it is a weapon. All of it is endurance equipment for an animal that has chosen to stay awake through the hardest season on the continent, while its competitors sleep. But we still have not covered the strangest behavior, and it is the one that explains why the wolverine needs all that frozen bone in the first place. It runs a refrigerator. When a wolverine finds more food than it can eat, which happens whenever it takes a large carcass, it does not gorge and move on. It dismantles the carcass and distributes the pieces. It carries portions away, sometimes hundreds of meters, and buries them in snow, wedges them into rock crevices, pushes them under boulders, or hangs them in the forks of trees. Then it remembers where they are. A single wolverine may maintain dozens of these caches scattered across a home range the size of a small country, and it will return to them weeks or months later. The cold does the preservation work. Snow and rock keep the temperature stable and keep the scent contained, which matters because a cache that a bear can smell is not a cache, it is a donation. And here is the elegant part. Those caches freeze solid. Which is precisely why the wolverine needs a rotated molar and a reinforced skull. It is not only eating other predators' frozen leftovers, it is eating its own, deliberately created months later in the part of winter when nothing else is available. The animal is not living hand to mouth. It is running a distributed storage system across 1,500 square kilometers, using the Arctic itself as the cooling unit. And it has evolved the dental hardware to open its own containers. That is not scavenging. That is planning. And yes, wolverines also hunt. This is another thing that gets underplayed because the scavenger label sticks. Wolverines kill. They take hares, ground squirrels, marmots, birds, and rodents routinely. And in deep snow conditions, they kill animals many times their own size. Reindeer, caribou, roe deer. Occasionally, moose calves, and there are documented cases of adult moose, although those are rare and usually involve an animal already weakened or trapped in deep snow. The method uses the foot-loading advantage directly. A reindeer in deep late winter snow sinks to its chest with every stride and exhausts itself within a few hundred meters. The wolverine stays on the crust. It does not need to be fast. It needs to be still moving when the reindeer cannot. And there is a second technique, which is where the mustelid temperament shows. Wolverines climb. They will go up a tree or onto a rock face above a game trail and drop onto the back of a passing animal, going straight for the neck and the base of the skull, using that jaw on the vertebrae, rather than trying to bring down an animal 5 times their weight by wrestling. 15 kilograms from above onto the spine. It works often enough to be a recorded strategy rather than an anecdote. So we have an animal that scavenges what nothing else can open, caches food across an enormous range, hunts prey 5 to 10 times its mass, and displaces larger predators from their kills. Which raises an obvious question. If it is this effective, why have you almost certainly never seen one? Because there are almost none of them. The global population is estimated in the low tens of thousands, spread across the entire circumpolar north. Alaska, northern Canada, Scandinavia, Russia, with small and fragile populations in the lower 48 states of the US. In the contiguous United States, the entire wolverine population is estimated at roughly 300 animals. 300, across the Rockies and the Cascades. And that scarcity is not an accident of persecution alone, although trapping did enormous damage historically. It is structural. An animal that requires up to 1,500 square kilometers of range cannot ever be common. The mathematics of the territory sets a hard ceiling on the population before a single trap is set. Wolverines are also, by the standards of field biology, nearly impossible to study. They move constantly. They avoid people. They occupy terrain that is difficult and dangerous to reach in winter, and they are smart enough to be wary of traps and camera stations. A great deal of what we know comes from a handful of long-term projects that spent years to collar a few dozen individuals. One of those projects produced the fact that changed how researchers think about this species, and it has nothing to do with fighting. It is about snow. A female wolverine does not give birth in a hollow log or a rock shelter. She digs a den into deep, persistent snowpack, often several meters down, sometimes with tunnels running 10 or 15 meters to a chamber at the end. She does this in February, in the coldest part of the year, and she gives birth there to 2 or 3 kits. The kits are born white, blind, and helpless, weighing about 100 grams each. That snow tunnel is the only thing standing between them and an environment that would kill them in minutes. And the requirement is specific, not snow in general, deep snow that persists into May, because that is when the kits are still dependent. Researchers mapped historical wolverine range against snowpack data and found that the distribution matches the persistent spring snow line almost exactly. Not the temperature line, not the forest line, the snow line. Which means the wolverine is not merely an animal that tolerates snow, it is an animal that is structurally dependent on it, at the single most vulnerable moment of its life cycle. Take away deep spring snowpack and the species does not adapt to a warmer forest. It has nowhere to put its young. That is why wolverine researchers talk about this animal more anxiously than almost any other large carnivore. Not because of hunting pressure, which is now regulated across most of the range, because the thing the species is built around is the thing that is retreating. The female raises those kits largely alone. The male's contribution is territorial rather than parental, although there is evidence in some populations of adult males visiting and traveling with their offspring, which is unusual in mustelids and still not fully explained. She nurses them in the snow chamber, then begins bringing them cached food, which means those distributed frozen stores across hundreds of square kilometers are not only her winter supply, they are the food supply for the next generation. The whole system connects. The territory size, the caching, the rotated tooth, the frozen bone, the snow den, the feet. It is one solution, repeated at every scale. And now I owe you the answer. At the start of this video, I told you the wolverine has one advantage that lets a 15-kilogram animal walk at 400 kilograms of bear and be taken seriously. I said it was not strength, not teeth, not speed. Here it is. The wolverine cannot afford to lose, and it behaves accordingly every single time without recalculating. That sounds like a personality trait. It is not. It is an ecological position expressed as behavior. Every other large animal in that landscape has a fallback. The bear has fat and a den. The wolf has a pack and a wider prey base. The lynx has hairs and a smaller calorie requirement. Every one of them can lose a contest, walk away, and be fine tomorrow. The wolverine has none of that. No hibernation, no pack, no fat reserve, no alternative food source in February. It has a home range so large that walking to the next opportunity costs days of energy it does not have spare. For this animal, every contested carcass is close to existential, and evolution has therefore removed the option of backing down, because an ancestor that backed down did not eat in March and did not become an ancestor. The result is an animal with no reverse gear. It does not root around the mountain, it goes over it. It does not avoid the frozen carcass, it chews it open. It does not withdraw from the bear, because withdrawal is not in the toolkit. And a bear standing over a meal it does not need, looking at an animal that will absolutely not stop, makes the only sensible decision available to a creature that has something to lose. It leaves. That is the whole trick. The wolverine does not win the fight. It makes the fight not worth having. And it does that by being an animal for whom nothing is optional. Go back to the opening scene. The bear on the carcass, the small dark shape coming up the slope. You now know that the fur on that shape will not ice over, that the feet will not sink, that the jaw can open, what the bear will leave behind anyway, that there are 30 caches hidden across 1,000 square kilometers behind it, and that somewhere under 3 meters of snow there may be 2 kits waiting for it to come back. And you know that it is not brave. Bravery implies a choice. This animal does not have one. The bear steps back. The wolverine takes the carcass apart, carries the pieces into the rocks and the snow, and disappears into terrain nothing else will cross. There are perhaps 300 of them left in the lower 48 states, and the snow they raise their young in is arriving later and leaving earlier every decade. If you had to survive a winter with only one of these adaptations, which would you take? The fur that never freezes, the feet that never sink, or the jaw that opens anything? Tell me in the comments, and tell me why.